The Houston Texans come to SoFi for the first time to take on the Rams in a Week 1 matchup. Football is back, and we're previewing all here on this crossover edition of Locked On Rams and Locked On Texans.
You are Locked On NFL Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What is up, Ramley, and what is up, Texans fans? My name is Doug McCain, the host of Locked On Rams, and I am joined by the host of Locked On Texans. You can follow him at John_Hickman, and we are here to break down the Rams-Texans Week 1 matchup at SoFi Stadium. If you're new to the show, a lot of new viewers, a lot of new listeners this week, right, John? Because football is back. Well, if you're new to these channels, if you're new to the podcast, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, hit the like button. Podcast listeners, write us a review. My name is Doug McCain. Like I said, I cover the Rams for Locked On. I've covered LA sports for over a decade. I do NFL radio for Westwood One. And we've got the great host of Locked On Texans. He has forgotten more Texans football than most people have ever known. This is the man when it comes to the Texans. So I can't wait to get into these matchups. But first, this crossover Thursday edition of Locked On Rams and Locked On Texans is presented by Prize Picks. Download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 off in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. So, John, you're getting down in the intro, man. You're like getting down. Like, I mean,
I'm excited.
I keep up with you, man. I mean, just getting down. I love it. But football is back, man. And look, we talk about this all summer. We preview every angle, but now it feels like something's tangible. We got a real game tonight. We got a real game tomorrow. And then Sunday, I think this is an underrated matchup as far as one of the very best matchups in Week 1. The Texans going into SoFi anywhere from a 2.5 to a 3-point underdog on FanDuel. I'm surprised that it's that, but you got to be absolutely just electrified by this matchup.
I am. I'm excited. You guys know it probably better than we do. You know, we're getting a chance to see Nick Caley versus Chris Shula, two guys that were in LA last year. Nick Caley's now here in Houston. Chris Shula stayed behind. McVay versus DeMeco Ryans, two guys that are a product of the Shanahan tree in some way, offensively or defensively. So I think this is going to be a huge matchup. I think FanDuel has it right. I don't see any of these teams putting up enough points to beat the opposing team by more than 3 points. Excuse me. I think it'll be close. I think when you look at what the Houston Texans does well, the Rams can combat that. What the Rams do well, the Texans can combat that. So I think it'll be one of those matchups that a lot of people are overlooking in terms of just good, pure football. The Houston Texans got something to say. The Rams got something to say. Hey, we just not old yet. We still got some life left. Houston, we have an opportunity here to win a championship. McVay, you've already done that. Move out the way. Here comes DeMeco Ryans, who will be the second Shanahan tree product to win one. Yeah, so I'm excited for this game.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that has to be one of the big storylines for the Texans and Nick Caley and a new offensive coordinator. And can you get a bounce back year from CJ Stroud, who kind of looks more like the rookie year CJ Stroud than the sophomore year CJ Stroud? We know a lot of that had to do with the offensive line play, but I think the number one story in Rams land, that we talked about again on this show, that is the back of Matthew Stafford. That was the storyline all off season is, one, would Stafford get traded, right? I mean, there was talk that there was a false story that he was in Montana hanging out with Tom Brady, and then all of a sudden he is possibly getting traded to the Giants, and he finally renews his vows, as I've been saying, with this Rams organization, and they continue their partnership to go after a couple more Super Bowls. And then he deals with the back issue, an aggravated disc in his back, and he's missing practice to start, and then he comes back. And then we got the great news a couple days ago that he's going to be ready to go in Week 1. And my question to you is, who's going to get after this guy? Is it Danielle Hunter? Is it Will Anderson? Because I think that all is going to be right in Rams land when you do get to it. I'm not saying I want my quarterback sacked or hit, because I don't, but it will make me feel better when he does get sacked or hit and he gets up and he feels fine and goes on the next play. But how much of the game plan is that, and who's going to get after Matthew Stafford?
Listen here, man. Will, Daniil, the guys on the inside, Tim Settle, Mario Edwards, who were very productive for Houston last year. Even when you look at how the Houston Texans utilized their linebackers, they were the third most blitzing team defensively in the NFL in 2024. So I expect for that to continue. And I'm going to say this, I love Matthew Stafford. Matthew Stafford is probably one of the last old guard type of quarterbacks. He came out 08, I think it was 08, 07 out of Georgia. He'll sling it. He'll stand in that pocket. But he's 37. And based off of last year, guys, when he was under pressure, he was one of the worst quarterbacks under pressure in 2024 in terms of PFF grading and what his numbers dipped. He also had 14 to 15 turnover-worthy plays under pressure. For Daniil and Will, that has got to be their number one priority, getting after him. You guys got some question marks outside at tackle. What's Jackson going to look like? What's your other tackle going to look like? So I like the matchup for Houston to get after Matthew Stafford. And I also believe it doesn't necessarily have to be sacks. That's great. But Houston has Derek Stingley, Kamari Lassiter, CJ Gardner-Johnson will be playing. So as you talk about Matthew Stafford and good news, GJ out there is good news for Houston. Caleb Bullock, who had 5 interceptions, they'll create turnovers for this Texans team. And for you guys, I kind of want to know, Matthew Stafford is a big story, but the offensive line, only 38 sacks last year, but a little bit of question marks right now. What's that going to look like for Houston? Are we going to have an issue getting after Stafford because of those guys up front?
I think this is the best the offensive line has looked heading into the season in a while, just because Kevin Dotson, who they brought over from Pittsburgh a couple years ago in a trade, and he's turned out to be everything they could have expected and more. He's someone that does his best work in the run game in that gap duo scheme, open up holes for Kyren Williams. But from a pass protection standpoint, the number one storyline was also kind of injury and health related too, and it was Alaric Jackson, because they signed Alaric Jackson to a big extension. And he had really just turned into one of the better left tackles in football. He's not an all-pro type of guy, but he's someone that is definitely one of the 15 to 17 best offensive linemen at his position in the sport. And he's really emerged. This guy's a former UDFA, and he was dealing with blood clots, and he's healthy. He's ready to go. And then you got Rob Havenstein. He's kind of Mr. Durable, reliable. He's the longest tenured Ram who's been with this team all the way back since St. Louis. And then you got Steve Avila, who you want to just kind of take a step up, because he's kind of from your neck of the woods, right? TCU product.
Kid, yeah.
And year one, really good. Year two, didn't take the step forward that we all had hoped. But I look back at the division round, and you got Jalen Carter getting to Matthew Stafford on that play and forcing that errant throw when the Rams were very close to beating that Eagles team. And we know what happened, right? The Eagles would win that game, going to win the Super Bowl. The Rams would have hosted the Commanders at home. And, I love me some Jaden Daniels, but I would have trusted the Rams at home at SoFi to get back to the Super Bowl. So what the Rams did was, instead of going with Bo Limmer, who's more of a depth piece this year, they brought back Coleman Shelton to solidify that center spot. And this is something that they emphasize and address in the offseason. They realized that, yes, our offensive line was good, but not as good as we wanted it to be. And I think you combine it with the fact that, as you mentioned, Matthew Stafford, 37, you want to keep him as vertical and you want to keep that jersey as clean as possible, that is going to be the emphasis for them. So definitely the strength of this team, I think, is going to be the line play on both sides. And they got a big test in week one against two premier edge rushers with the Texans.
Yeah, absolutely. I think when we look at some of the key matchups, which we'll get into, I'm sure, next, y'all DBs, man.
Yeah, that's a big test for sure.
It's a big test. I can't wait to talk about that.
Yeah. What do you think about going to SoFi, man? First trip at SoFi Stadium.
Yeah. So I'm kind of jealous as a fan of football. I'm jealous. I would have loved to be out there. Can't make that trip. I'm a credentialed media member here in Houston, so I would have loved to have been out there. But I think for the Houston Texans, again, it's a part of the storyline a little bit. Guys are going back home. Nick Caley is going back home. D'Amico Ryans is going back to a place where, West Coast, right? He coached up over in San Fran. So SoCal, you guys just got a new stadium recently, right? State-of-the-art type of stadium. I'm sure that can kind of throw the average person off. But I think for Houston, this is one thing I want to mention. You guys are Super Bowl champs. I mean, not recently, but within the last 5 years, they got it done. For the Houston Texans to change their perception, they're going to have to win these games against Super Bowl winners. Now, they're 3-5 against Super Bowl coaches. They've lost to Harbaugh twice. They've lost to Andy Reid 2 or 3 times. They got to find a way to win this game, because if they do, that kicks off their 2025 season with a different perception about them. So that's why I think this is an extremely important game for the Houston Texans.
I totally agree. I think for both teams, it's more than just your regular week one with the entire season in front of you. I think it just sets the tone for the entire season for both teams. The Rams 4-1 against the Texans. They've outscored Houston 155-85. They've averaged 14 points per game as far as a margin of victory. Stafford, though, is 1-3 versus the Texans, right? So, hey, pick what stat fits your narrative, right? I mean, that's kind of what you got to do here. But coming up next, we've got the key matchups that are ultimately going to determine who wins this week one opener at SoFi Stadium. Football is back. I'm going to keep saying it because every time I say it, it just brings a smile to my face. Football is back, ladies and gentlemen, and we're breaking down this Texans-Rams matchup coming up next on the crossover edition of Locked On Rams and Locked On Texans. This episode of Locked On Rams and Locked On Texans is brought to you by DoorDash. It's almost the weekend. It's time to look back and crown this week's MVP, who delivered, powered by DoorDash. Just like you can win every Saturday with DoorDash streaks, saving more every time you order. These players delivered when it mattered most. Let's break it down. So for me, of course, there is no week one yet, so there's no players to give this award to, but I'm going to give it to Matthew Stafford and Alaric Jackson for the Rams just because they're healthy. They're ready to go. There were some doubts about that heading into the season, but the Rams have a clean bill of health going into this week one. So both those guys getting MVPs, and when the pressure was on, Matthew Stafford and Alaric Jackson were ready to go. There was no hesitation, no delay. And if you've been watching week after week, this performance wasn't a fluke. These guys are on a hot streak. And just like Matthew Stafford delivered for the Rams, DoorDash delivers your Saturdays and Sundays with DoorDash streaks. You can save every Saturday and Sunday for your order, stack it up all season, and you could save up to $250, include $100 in DoorDash credits. Order this Saturday. Keep the streak alive. Fuel your game day only with DoorDash. Terms apply. Promo period through 11/18. And we are off and running on this crossover edition of Locked On Rams and Locked On Texans. Here in our second segment, we're going to get into the nitty-gritty, the matchups that will determine this game. And, John, the first one I want to talk about is these cornerbacks for the Texans, because I think you can make a case that Derek Stingley is the best cover corner in the National Football League. But even behind him, you got Kamari Lassiter, you got Jalen Petrie, their fourth and pass defense. Talk to me about this group and the problem they could present for this Rams passing offense.
Just the ability to take away things short and deep at the same time. Man, they got 2 guys behind them that they really trust. 3 guys, actually. One being Kalen Bullock, who flies around the field when the pass is in the air. 5 interceptions last year. The Super Bowl champ, CJ Gardner-Johnson. And then they also have a backup in MJ Stewart, who the Houston Texans really like. And I think that we will probably see a good number of snaps shared between MJ Stewart and CJ Gardner-Johnson as we're trying to get him back to full strength. But he will be playing and available Sunday. So I think for the Houston Texans, like, you got 2 guys that can play physical, play the line of scrimmage, but also has great technique not to get beat. And I'm going to tell you guys this, Rams fans out there, don't ever think Derek Stingley is just letting a person get open. He has some of the greatest ball skills of this generation as a quarterback, and he does a very good job as a cornerback, but he does a very good job of baiting quarterbacks into throws. Then that speed, that mythological speed, a lot of people say it was a 4.2 coming out of LSU. He can catch it. He got great ball skills and go up to get the ball, and he can make a turnover. So I think for us, it's like that's why they're so good. Every facet of the game that you want from a cornerback and just DBs all together, the versatility of Jalen Petrie, who plays around the line of scrimmage, that gives Houston an additional edge. Now, for me on the flip side, I wanted to ask you about the DB group for the LA Rams. Those guys are not the greatest, right? Still professional athletes, no disrespect. But is that a weakness for the Rams defense?
So that's a question that needs to be answered early on this season because there is familiarity there, right? Ahkello Witherspoon and Darius Williams and Kobe Durant have been with this team for multiple seasons. And Ahkello Witherspoon, when he's right, I mean, you get some A to B cornerback play. And then when he's not as locked in, not as dialed in, you see a guy that's average to below average. But I think with Ahkello, he had such a strong finish to his season against the Vikings, against the Eagles, two teams with premier receivers. He played well. Darius Williams, I don't think had the year they would hoped he would have. Kobe Durant, someone who's in the last year of his rookie deal that's trying to have that light turn on. You can see him in the slot a little bit. But the big wild card is Emmanuel Forbes. And you might remember Emmanuel Forbes from Mississippi State, 14 interceptions, has the FBS record for pick sixes. They claimed him off of waivers from the Commanders, and the knock on him was that he was undersized as far as his weight. I mean, was he a $160 soaking wet? Who knows? But he's added some muscle with the Rams, and Sean McVay said a couple days ago that he feels like he has 4 starting cornerbacks. And I think out of the gates, it's going to be Ahkello and Darius Williams, but that's going to be very interesting to see how they perform early in that game, because if they're getting cooked or you're not seeing the best play out of them, I do think there's a world where you could get them subbed in by Chris Shula and you could see some other guys get some opportunities. I think that's a kind of a wide open spot for this team. And ultimately it's going to determine whether or not this is a top 20 defense and a top 10 defense, because we know along the front, we'll talk about those guys, they got dudes, right? But you're absolutely right. Like if there's an area that could be a weakness for the Rams, it's definitely their cornerbacks. But I do think that the Rams had multiple opportunities to bring in more cornerbacks. Like they could have drafted cornerback position. They could have drafted a corner higher. They could have gone out there and picked up like a Jair Alexander, someone like that. They could have picked someone up, and they didn't. And the reason why they didn't was because they felt confident in this group. And I think that you got to play to your strengths, and it's not going to be their strength. But I do think that these guys are talented enough to where they're not going to be the worst cornerbacks room in the NFL. But I wanted to ask you, this is my main matchup question for you. The offensive line, right?
I know.
You know what's coming. I mean, at least I waited 19 minutes, John. Okay? I waited 19 minutes.
And 21 seconds.
You know? So Laramie Tunsil's gone. You got multiple new offensive linemen. And last year, just kind of looking at the difference between coordinator last season and Caley, is it felt like there were a lot of slow developing plays for CJ Stroud and him not getting the ball out quick enough. How are they going to change that this year to make things easier for CJ Stroud? And what do you think the plan of attack is going to be against this ferocious front for the Rams?
Well, one thing that I really do like about Nick Caley, and he has a lot of admiration for me and also the players, is he's listening to the players and he understands what works best for the players. So a lot of people like to attribute his Rams days with what we'll see here in Houston, and they completely disregard his New England days. And so when we look at how they're going to attack the run, I think we'll see a lot of what he helped implement in LA, but what he brought over from New England, just making it simple and easy for his offensive linemen and the running backs. But also when we look at the passing game, yeah, man, it's going to be, let's get the ball out quickly here. CJ Stroud has all throughout last year, so it's kind of, he manifested getting someone like Nick Caley, but he's always kind of looked at Matthew Stafford and Tom Brady. Oh, well. Look at those two guys. Who's been around those two guys? Nick Caley in New England, of course, LA. So I think that we'll see a mixture of the offense taking shots when they are there, but it won't be as repetitive and consistently as it was in 2024. That hurt the Houston Texans. Why? They didn't have an offensive line to let those plays develop. Now, what I see here, slant game is going to be utilized a lot more, right? Just some stick routes for your tight ends to get them involved in the game. That's going to be utilized a lot more here in Houston. And also the perfecting of the screen game. They tried it in Houston last year with Bobby Sloyd, but it didn't work. The screens that I saw from Houston in preseason, granted it's preseason, they looked effective. So, they're going to get that ball out. They're going to allow CJ Stroud to have, I think, a multitude of different plays that he can call at the line of scrimmage, depending on the defensive front or what the scheme looks like for the defensive side of the ball. But the freedom is going to be there for the quarterback. The freedom is going to be there for the offense because they're not going to be tied down to one specific quote unquote scheme.
Yeah, that's definitely going to be interesting. The fact that they know Sean McVay's offense. And I think that Sean McVay's offense is continuing to evolve. And of course, he knows that and what they're going to kind of latch onto. But I don't think the Texans are really talked about enough as a potentially top 5 defense. I mean, they really have some studs on this team. I mean, you look at
who's not talking about them.
I mean, like
we are.
You are. Trust me, I know how it feels like when you're in your market. You guys are right, but let's be honest. Like the Texans, they're not talked about like some other teams that have been around this league for longer, right? Some of the flagship franchises, and I think there's a major opportunity for the Texans with that secondary, with that pass rush to really say, okay, if we can just get the offense we had a couple years ago, this is a team that should win their division again potentially and could take a step forward and win some playoff games. I look at the fact that Texas had the second most interceptions last year. I mean, had 19 interceptions. That was second in the NFL. Stingley and Bullock both had 5. And then you're 4th most in sacks, 13th in pressure rate, 49 total sacks. So I look at a team that has shown the ability to get to the quarterback and the ability to turn over the quarterback. So I think this is a major, major test for Matthew Stafford, who, along with trying to play through a little back situation, is trying to work in a new receiver in Davante Adams. And I think that's a major storyline to look at here too.
Absolutely. And I want to point out to that Davante Adams point, great weapon to have for Matthew Stafford, reliable weapon to have. Last time the Houston Texans saw Davante Adams, and the last time Derek Stingley lined up on Davante Adams, 1 catch for 5 yards. If there was ever a game, because D'Amico Ryans doesn't do this in the regular season, but if there was ever a game to set the tone and have your best cornerback cover a team's best receiver, it's absolutely week 1 against the LA Rams. And I would love for us to see that matchup.
It's going to be a test, and we'll talk about it. I'm also going to tell John a story about my grandparents who live in Sugar Land, Texas, and what they did to me a long time ago. That's coming up next. And our predictions too. And our predictions too. That's coming up next on Locked On Rams. This episode of Locked On Rams and Locked On Texans is brought to you by Mazda. Mazda crafts cars for those who choose to do more than simply move. They follow what moves them every time they drive, and that's what makes Mazda stand out. They go beyond safety, style, and performance to deliver a driving experience that feels alive in every detail. Mazda offers more than safety. It's won more 2025 IIHS Top Safety Pick Plus awards than anyone else as of August 2025. As an athlete focuses on every detail, Mazda does the same. From metallic accents to hand-stitched Napa leather, you can feel it the moment you get behind the wheel. The smooth handling, intuitive controls, and standard all-wheel drive in every crossover SUV. Whether it's a quick drive to practice or a weekend road trip, Mazda makes even everyday drives feel special. It's the small details that make the big plays, and just like there's more to every player, there's more to a Mazda vehicle. Mazda, move and be moved. This episode of Locked On Rams is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. And I love FanDuel. I use it all the time, every week, every game. I love using FanDuel because it fits however you like to bet. Player props, building a same-game parlay, or even jumping in live as the action unfolds. It makes every game more exciting, whether you're watching your team or just keeping an eye on your fantasy lineup. It's quick, easy, and the best way to add a little more energy to Sundays. So are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. And welcome back to this crossover edition of Locked On Rams and Locked On Texans. All right, John, here in our third segment, before we get to our predictions, just want to let you know, my grandparents lived in Sugar Land, Texas for a long, long time. So as a kid, I would go to Houston And you know about the Dodgers Astros thing, right? There's a lot of bad blood there. We won't get into the weeds on it. There you go. But when I was a baby, I visited my grandparents and they took me to like a J.C. Penney or Sears. You know, I used to take those pictures back in the day. And I have a full-blown baby picture of me in the Astros jersey, hat, jersey, like the whole nine. Come on. I would get canceled by Dodgers Nation if they would see me in this Astros gear. So my grandparents have been using it to blackmail me for years, but just want to let you know that that's how it goes down.
A little friendly wager here. Let's say that the Texans win this game. Can we see that photo? Can we?
Okay. How about this, John? How about I'll just send it to you, right? But with a, I need like a signature that you can't send this out to anyone because I'm telling you, Dodgers fans would use that against me. Like it would just be criminal. People would think it'd be like AI or something, John. All right, let's get into our predictions because it's week 1. Hope springs eternal for your team. I think the Rams at home with the year they have. I mean, you talk about this Texans team, all these young pieces, this future. It feels like a successful season for the Texans, winning a couple playoff games, taking a big step forward, right? I think that, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, that feels like it would be a successful season. For the Rams, knowing this could be the last year of Matthew Stafford, and if it's not the last year, the next year most likely will be. If you don't win a Super Bowl or get to the Super Bowl, they're going to internally consider it a failure. So for the Rams, I think you need to come out week 1, win week 1, because last 2 years, you started 1-4 last year, 3-6 the year before that. A strong start, I think, is pivotal for this team. And I think week 1, Sean McVay's gone 6-2 in week 1. I got the Rams winning this one in week 1. But what say you, John?
So initially I had the Houston Texans losing this game, but then the back issues of Matthew Stafford started to become a little bit more relevant in my decision-making. Again, I'm a big fan of Matthew Stafford. I think that he is an old guard quarterback, something that I don't think a lot of people appreciate anymore, which is a problem for me personally. We got to get back to how those quarterbacks were developed and now how these quarterbacks are being developed. But I say all that to say, I think the Houston Texans are going to create the right amount of pressure to get after Matthew Stafford, to get him on the ground, to get some of those errant throws, and to get those balls into the hands of some of their playmakers on the back end of their defense. And not to mention their linebacker group with a healthy Christian Harris who'll be playing Azeez Al-Shire, who's a team captain. Those guys can hit, they can fly, they can cover sideline to sideline. So I'm going to go against my original prediction, and I'm going to go Houston in this game. I got 2 scores that I can see happening. 21-17, 24-21. But I don't think this will be a high-scoring game. I think both teams will be led by their defense to create plays, and offense will just have to work with a short field to put up points.
I love that. I think it's a solid score. I mean, wow, what a big surprise. Rams guy picks Rams, Texans guy picks Texans in week 1. What do you know? I got Rams 24-17, but I do think that it could be closer than that. I mean, I wouldn't be absolutely shocked if the Texans came in and won this game because of all the points that you did make. And let's be honest, too. Week 1 lies, right? It's tough to truly assess what a team
guys didn't
like
play in the preseason. They didn't put the starters out there in the preseason, so kind of hard to game plan for that. Week 1 does lie.
And it's going to be exciting. I'm telling you, this could be the matchup that ends up being the best game in week 1 because I think these teams are evenly matched. There's a lot of star power. Both teams have pretty solid familiarity with each other. It could be a little chess match. So I'm excited. I think it's going to be a great game, and we'll see CJ. I don't want to see CJ Stroud like doing this back at, that's my worst CJ Stroud. Okay. That's my worst CJ Stroud. I want to see like Kyron doing that, right? But we know he's going to be back home, Rancho Cucamonga native. I'm sure he'll have a lot of friends and family there, but it's going to be a good one, and it's good for all football fans because football is officially back. And we're going to be back after the game, too, to break it all down on Locked On Texans and Locked On Rams. My name is Doug McCain. You can follow me on X and Instagram at DMAC_LA. And you can follow my man, John Hickman, at John_Hickman12. And also a reminder to catch all of the NFL previews. Last week, you got the Texans and Rams preview. And now it's not too late to binge every Locked On division preview. Be the most informed NFL fan in an 8-episode series, bringing you every division winner, breakout star, and Super Bowl contender. Find the link in the description to the Locked On NFL playlist on YouTube, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And until next time, John, what's the Texans saying? For us, it's whose house, Rams house. What are the Texans saying?
Oh, man. Swarm. They're going to swarm. This is a team that wants to swarm, that stands for something, but essentially they want all sides of the ball, both sides of the ball, and special teams to be fast, to be physical, to play with speed and get after it. And so hopefully they do that.
They're going to swarm, and for us, it's whose house? It's Locked On Rams house.